Rachel Reeves' farm tax is going to kill British farming. I was kindly invited onto the BBC this week to discuss this on Politics Live. So for the next 10 minutes, enjoy my appearance on national television.
Northamptonshire. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us today. We can see the anger and the reaction that there was in the farming community to do with all of this. What do you want the Chancellor to do, given there's all this speculation now that actually she might be changing some of these plans?
Well, with the speculation on the horizon, it is interesting, and it would be better for small family farms if what the rumour is what comes to fruition. One of the worst things about it, though, on the run up to what's been going on, is it's been so much speculation and so many farmers not really knowing what to do, and you've had farmers taking their own lives and things like this, and they, if they're going to come and U-turn after that, there's going to be a lot of blood on their hands for things like that. But the worst part of it is why is they U-turning now? Is it because they've finally got the facts, finally got the numbers, or is it because they're listening, or was it because they were planning on doing this all along and were just feeding us the worst scenario, so we'd be happy with this? There's a lot of speculation here, really.
And just to remind people of what the plans were or are as they stand, which is that farmers with assets of more than £1 million would have to pay inheritance tax of 20%. I think if it's a couple, they could actually leave double that. And the speculation is that that threshold might rise to £5 million. I mean, there will be lots of people watching this who think £5 million, you know, that's a lot of money. Why shouldn't you be paying your fair share?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's bigger than farms. It's about food security. So one of the worst parts of the inheritance tax that I've been fighting for on all my channels is one of food security. Just look at your energy prices at the moment. We import so much of these things, and we used to make all the energy ourselves. And the bills have gone through the roof because we rely on importing it. If we rely on importing food, which is what we face if farms have to sell their farmland to pay this tax bill, then we'll end up with exactly the same problem with our food as we've got currently with things like energy prices. And people are struggling to put food on the table at the current prices. So it's bigger than my farm. Forget my farm necessarily. It's a food security issue for the country. And I'm wondering if Rachel Reeves has just kind of woken up to the fact, because we've been banging on this drum for a long time.
We have had a comment from one of our viewers, Richard, who is in Basingstoke, and it's really along these lines. He says, "This infuriates me that these farmers don't want to pay their fair share. They claim that they are asset rich but cash poor, but doesn't that apply to lots of people? I build houses, doctors save lives, we all still have to pay." What do you say to that?
Well, you can't have doctors or build any houses without your food. And fundamentally, that is what the issue is here. What I'd also say, a lot of the difference around the inheritance tax for farms around inheritance. Sorry?
Oh, I don't know what that was, Ben. Sounded like an animal.
Yeah, it might have been. And the main difference is the reason inheritance tax exists in the first place is because it's a windfall. As much as it's a gut-wrenching time for most people, it is a windfall for most. Governments for years, since 1984, including Labour governments, have understood the importance of not taxing farms so they can be passed successively to the next generation without risking our food security. And unfortunately, when you tax a farm in this way, it's farmland that disappears and the businesses will just stop to function and you'll stop growing the food. Whereas as much as it's disheartening if your parents left you a house or you left your children a house, it's still a windfall to the children.
Okay.
Unless they, of course, live in that. But then there's regulations to stop it if you do live in the house. So I'm not saying I want inheritance tax for anybody, if I'm completely honest.
Okay. Ben, stay with us, because I just want to bring the panel in on this. Stella, sure. Where are you in all of this?
Look, I think I absolutely hear Ben's passion and the frustration that he feels with this. I think two things are true about this. One, I think the government has won the argument that there are people using agricultural land as a way of avoiding tax. And it's clear that there may be better ways to do this that can better protect farmers. There can be no greater champions for that argument than many of my colleagues on my backbenches who represent rural communities who spent the last year making arguments about recognising where land is actually being used for growing food. And Ben is absolutely right to point to food security. Actually, we've never been a food secure country. About this time of year, we're now importing about 50%.
But you think so? Do you think it should stay as it is, or do you
no?
think
I think it's absolutely right to look if there are better ways to do this. And I listen to my colleagues. There's a proposal that's walking around about looking at where people are using assets and recognising where the land is actually being farmed, as opposed to where it is being land banked, essentially.
But up a threshold of 5 million?
No, look, because there's quite an interesting paper by Senpat which is talking about a way that you might actually raise more money if you do this in a different way.
Okay.
I think good governments listen to their backbenchers, like listen to my colleagues from those rural groups who've made that very powerful case, and I think make a good case both in terms of the exchequer and in how we deal with some of the issues Ben is talking about food security.
Okay, James, where are you on this?
I think it was very clear.
Oh, Ben, sorry, let's bring Ben back in. He's at a disadvantage out there.
Sorry.
That's okay. The only thing I was going to say is you've had Keir Starmer coming out publicly putting the farms against the NHS, which I think is fundamentally wrong, especially when the annual farm tax revenue that they forecast to make is about 0.3% of the budget. And I think that a lot of farmers felt that it was particularly Labour fighting against farming, and I think that's why you've had the uproar. And they're putting it against public services, like you've been speaking about earlier. It's not the correct way to do it.
OK, let Stella answer that.
No, look, and I hear you, Ben, but I would also tell you have had some fantastic champions on my benches making the case and arguing that we need to differentiate between those people who have, frankly, abused farming and used it as a way of avoiding tax, and those people like yourselves
Stella,
who are trying to make a living.
constituents, if they think that farmers can have assets of £5, even £10 million and not pay inheritance tax, what would they say?
No, my constituents would understand if there's a better way of doing this that actually, frankly, will raise more money than the existing proposals. That is good for everybody and it protects people like Ben.
James?
I think we can be clear that the family farm tax has been a disastrous policy so far. I'm from a farming family and I was meeting with my farmers just last week at our brilliant local agricultural college in Plumpton, speaking to them about this. And it's important to understand it's not just the inheritance tax that's happened. They've also accelerated the tapering of the basic payment scheme, which is going to mean a 76% reduction in that, which will cost farmers tens of thousands of pounds. We've now got this sort of hodgepodge of schemes, none of them are long-term, that mean that farmers can't really secure their businesses or look at long-term investments, and that is detrimental to the farming industry. It's also important to remember, people often contextualise it as if this is a sort of a normal industry that functions in a normal way. It doesn't. It's quite an unusual industry, and it doesn't just function like others do.
So do you think Rachel Reeves should tweak it? What do you think she should do? Scrap it?
Ideally, she'd U-turn on it completely. I mean, it's doing damage to the farming industry at a time it's already challenging. We had the terrible trade deals with New Zealand and Australia under the last government. Farming has been under attack for a long time in this country, and this is just the latest in a long line of attacks. And you heard what we've been saying here, that farmers feel like the government is trying to get to them, and there's a reason for that, and it's not completely unreasonable.
Well, I'm slightly concerned now that in modern political discourse, the assumption is always that if somebody has been successful, they've done it in slightly dodgy or unscrupulous ways. And I wonder how on earth we're going to prosper as an economy, as a society, if that's our outlook. Nevertheless, I think there are a lot of assumptions around family farms which are demonstrably false. This idea that they would just be able to pay the inheritance tax. Well, many of them are very illiquid. They've made massive investments into farming machinery, for instance. Then if they do close, as many rural businesses are having to, we're going to have consolidation. And has anybody thought that through and questioned whether it's something we really want? Then you've got the fact that actually there's evidence to suggest that it's not wealthy landowners who are being impacted by this, but working farmers. Farmers work on average 60-hour weeks. That's considerably more than many other people in the workplace and in our economy. So Labour absolutely should reverse this, but what I would like to see is us scrapping inheritance tax altogether. I mean, there's a reason why it's one of this country's most loathed taxes.
Stella, if this is true and Rachel Reeves does backtrack on this, it does feel like a lot of her last budget is unravelling, and it does suggest that if you protest, we saw pictures of farmers protesting for a very long time in Whitehall. If you protest, as Labour MPs did about welfare cuts, they just cave in.
No, but I genuinely be interested in, James, do you see any concerns at all about how arable land has been used in the tax system and people using the tax reliefs? I mean, this idea came from recognising that there were people who are not farming the land. We're not talking about family farms. We are talking about people who are using land.
They're the ones who are being impacted by your policy.
So the question is, how do you deal with that and how you protect people like Ben? If the policy evolves, surely that's a good thing.
Yeah, let's bring
Ben. But there is evidence of that.
Ben, you can have the final word here.
Well, my issue on that is whether I condone it or not, is it's rules set by the government, not by farmers. So if you don't want loopholes for tax buying, don't create them.
What do you say to that?
But that is exactly what they are. That is exactly what they have been trying to do. As I say, I think the government has won the argument. There is an issue here. What I think my colleagues have done. There is an issue. There is an issue with people putting. There is an issue with people putting property into and using agricultural relief. The question is, how do you stop that whilst also protecting people who genuinely want to pass on the family farm, who genuinely are using the land? And I think
Ben,
the Senate
final word, and then we're going to move on.
Example
Ben?
of that.
Quite frankly, if the farm's producing food that we sell in the UK, it should be a farm and treated as so. If any other thing, then we look at it then. But fundamentally, if we're growing food and that's what it's doing, then it needs to be subject to these breaks for the food security of the nation.
OK, Ben Aveling, thank you very much indeed for speaking